rich girl, she don't try. Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Is a poor boy, empty as a pocket, empty as a pocket with nothing to lose. Ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na, she got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na, she got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. People say she's crazy, she got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Well, that's one way to lose this walking blue. The diamonds on the soles of her shoes. She was physically forgotten, and she slipped into my pocket with my car key. She said you take it for granted because I please you. Wearing diamonds on the soles of her shoes. But I said, ooh, I see everybody else knows what I'm talking about. I see everybody else knows exactly what I'm talking about. Talking about that. The poor boy changes clothes to put on aftershave to compensate for his ordinary shoes. She said, honey, take me dancing, but they ended up by sleeping in the doorway by the boy against the lights on Broadway, wearing diamonds on the soles of her shoes. But I can say, ooh. I see everybody else knows what I'm talking about. I see everybody else knows exactly what I'm talking about. Talking about that. good, the land is fine. Hold your hand, that holds your mind. Get the fire, cover it all in blood. Tell me why do we in the land? Africa, 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 yeah. Cry for peace, Africa. This song was written to show how lucky we are as Kenyans. Because when we look around us, the other countries are fighting themselves over very petty issues. But we don't have that situation here in Ghana. It's a song that was written to remind us of the peace we have and how lucky we are that we are peaceful in Ghana. The land is good, the land is fine. Hold your hand, like holds your mind. Yet we're fine, covering all in blood. Tell me why we wallow in the land. Africa, 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 yeah. We cry for peace, Africa. Africa, 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 yeah. We cry for peace, Africa. Thank you very much.
We want to start off this occasion with an opening prayer. We shall call on the President-elect, Engineer Leslie GhIE, to offer us an opening prayer.
I humbly ask that you all rise. Shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this occasion. Father, we thank you especially for your grace and love to us and for bringing us here. Father, in the beginning you created all things, and all things were in a perfect state. Father, we are gathered here because we're making an attempt to bring sanity. Your word says that we should be perfect even as you are perfect. Father, we thank you so much, and we pray that you open our hearts and minds to be able to absorb the things that he is speaking to us, so that we'll be able to implement the thing, not only be hearers, but doers. Father, we ask this in the name that's above every name, even Jesus Christ. And let all who under the sound of my voice say amen.
Amen. Can we please rise to honor our nation with the national anthem? The Honorable Senior Minister, Mr. Yao Safumafu, Fellow of the Ghana Institution of Engineers, Honorable Ministers of State here present, Honorary Fellows, past Presidents of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, Council members, distinguished invited guests, all other protocols observed. It is my singular honor to welcome you to this momentous occasion. The presidential address of the GhIE is arguably the highlight of the tenure of the president of the institution. This year's event, the 49th in the series, is special as it occurs during the 50th anniversary year of the Ghana Institution of Engineering. The GhIE is anchored in the belief that a nation cannot be transformed without a strong indigenous engineering sector. We recognize that most pressing issues militating against our development are engineering related. The GhIE will do our utmost to ensure that the standards, regulations, and guidelines governing engineering practice are strictly enforced. In this regard, we wish to respectfully notify all firms who engage engineering practitioners, both local and foreign, that they are to ensure that these persons are certified to practice in compliance with the Engineering Council Act 819/2011. To discharge his onerous responsibilities, the president of the GhIE is supported by a 21-member governing council. At this stage, please permit me to introduce you to the members of the 2018-2019 Governing Council of the Ghana Institution of Engineering. The chairman for today's occasion was born in Damongo in the northern region of Ghana. He hails from the Kokulasi clan in Mankuma, and his maternal parents are from Pimbe near Salaga in the East Gonja district. He's a specialist consultant in agriculture and rural development with global experience in many countries in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, spanning the last 3 decades. He has held technical, managerial, and policy advisory positions in several international institutions, namely the Overseas Development Administration, ODA of the UK, the Food Agricultural Organization Investment Center in Rome, and Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa. He is currently the Executive Director of Rural and Agricultural Development Associates, a consulting firm. Our chairman schooled in Ghana until the age of 12, when he traveled to the UK, where he completed the rest of his secondary and tertiary education, graduating at the University of Reading with a bachelor's degree. He continued with his postgraduate studies at the London University, earning an MSc, and returned to his alma mater, University of Reading, for his PhD. He is also a politician, having actively supported the rebuilding of the center-left as a political force. He became the presidential candidate for the Convention's People's Party in 2012. Despite his travels, he is also profoundly grounded in culture. He has made significant contributions to his hometown, including the establishment of One Step Rural Bank and an agricultural mechanization service center at Damongo, his birthplace. He's previously served as chairman of Ghana-China Cooperation Committee and the CSIR Institute in Kumasi. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's put our hands together and welcome the chairman for this occasion, Dr. Michael Abu Sakara Foster.
Senior Minister, Honorable Yao Safumafu, Mr. President, engineers, comrades and colleagues, I am grateful for the privilege to chair this annual meeting of the Ghana Institute of Engineering. I don't know why you would pick an agriculturalist to do that, although I have a fairly good idea, because agriculture and engineering are very close. If the usefulness of a profession is by the dignity it accords human beings, then we would say agriculture is the noblest because it keeps us fed and healthy. But then, the people with the most food are not the people with the most land. They're the people who have mechanized and scientifically improved their agriculture, and engineering has a lot to play in that. So I would say that engineering was probably preceding agriculture in terms of man's use of tools. On an occasion such as this, my role is to simply set the stage and make a few remarks that will bring the subject home to everybody in real terms. My remarks are also supposed to strike a chord that made the subject at hand provocative and memorable to the audience. Alas, when it comes to sanitation in Africa, a certain President Trump has already taken the wind out of my sails. The subject of our discourse today will focus on how the profession of engineering impacts on sanitation's influence on our habitat, our health, and even our sense of self-esteem. A base dwelling full of filth and lack of planning connotes base communities that are incapable of organizing themselves or even having a sense of cleanliness and decency. And if indeed cleanliness is next to godliness, then I would say, by looking at some of the drains in our environment, that we're a bit further from God than we would like to think. The sanitation around us says a lot about us, in fact, more about us than grand buildings, roadways, airports, and buildings. If sanitation around you is poor, the environment quickly loses its appeal. So I think we can all agree that adequate and proper sanitation is therefore not just a matter of health, but of our very self-esteem and dignity as a people. It is with this in mind that we must not spare any public effort in achieving the most basic level of sanitation for human habitation. I will later have the privilege of inviting my very good friend, Steve Amani Yankson, to address us. But I think for now, we will listen to the video that follows. Thank you very much for this honor. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We put our hands together for our president. Just before I invite our president to give us a speech, I want to say just one thing about his contribution in Tanzania, because I was based there for 10 years. I was there before he came, and I was there after he left. And I got to know a lot of the political class who were about my age. And one question they always asked me was, when is your friend coming to our region? Because you could see the regions transforming in terms of their urban roads during the time he was there. And I wish that Ghanaians would have the opportunity to contribute to their own country as much as they have contributed to other African countries. Mr. President, with these few words, I invite you to give us your address. Thank you.
Senior Minister, representing the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Ministers of State, members of the Diplomatic Corps, past President of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, representatives of professional bodies here present, fellow members of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, Nananum and Neme, members of the press, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome again. It is my unpleasant duty to remind us all today that Ghana still maintains the unenviable position of being among the bottom 7 countries in the world with the poorest access to sanitation. You will therefore forgive me if this rather touchy subject affects some sensibilities, bearing in mind the sumptuous dinner that awaits us when we get home today. I will consider it a measure of success if this event, your reflections on sanitation in Ghana, begin to take into account the true state of affairs, which is unacceptable after 60 years of independence. Mr. Chairman, sanitation in Ghana has been relegated to the municipal and metropolitan municipal and district assemblies, who face serious difficulties in terms of manpower and other resources needed to combat the problems they are facing. This arrangement and its multiplying effect have over the years made Ghanaians oblivious to how good sanitation policies and practices can underpin healthy living, socioeconomic development, and environmental protection. To buttress this point, Mr. Chairman, permit me to give an account of plagues and epidemics that have eventually broken out in countries that ignore the importance of sanitation as we are doing today in Ghana. Between 1656 and 1658, that's a 2-year period, The Black Death plague broke in Naples, Italy, killing nearly half of the population of the town. As a result of this outbreak, the Italian Baroque artist and poet called Salvatore Rosa, who himself lost an infant son, was inspired to paint his famous art piece entitled The Frailty of Human Life. The plague also claimed his brother, his sister, his sister's husband, and their 5 children. Tests conducted on the skeletal remains from a number of plague sites confirmed that the responsible pathogen, the pathogen's name is Yersinia pestis. That's a terrible microbe. And this was the same pathogen that was responsible for the outbreak that killed about 50 to 200 million people in Europe, that is in the 14th century. Mr. Chairman, I wish to contrast this narrative with the bubonic plague outbreak in Accra, reported in 1909. While only a few lives were lost in the case of the 1909 plague in Accra, we should be mindful that Africa is not yet totally free of bubonic plague. In fact, the recent Ebola case reminds us that such things can recur. I make this statement from the hindsight of the report of Professor J.W. Simpson, an English medical officer who was sent to the Gold Coast to investigate the outbreak. His report painted a picture of the alarming nature of the unsanitary condition in Accra at the time. The report triggered the first colonial intervention to provide water supply in Ghana. Consequently, Mr. Chairman, the Accra Water Supply Project, using the Densu River as the source, was inaugurated by Governor Clifford in 1914 at a cost of £253,000. And this was for a population of 22,572. That was the population of Accra at the time. As a follow-up, Governor Clifford considered installation of a sewage system as a necessary condition to derive the full benefits from the water supply program. Subsequently, an engineer was dispatched from the Home Office to start work on the sewage project. However, the outbreak of the First World War and the associated financial insecurity caused the scheme to be dropped. Mr. Chairman, the period after the First World War saw considerable improvement in the social spending in the Gold Coast, particularly under the governorship of Sir Gordon Gargisbeck, who instituted a 10-year development program. Listen to Governor Gargisbeck. I call him the governor of vision. And I quote, "Unless the Gold Coast spend every penny it can justifiably afford on extending its present lamentably inadequate facilities for transport, education, and sanitation, its progress must and will be so hopelessly retarded as to give real cause for discontent, unrest, and failure. End of quote. Mr. Chairman, today is the World Toilet Day, and for us in Ghana, the appropriate time, perhaps, to interrogate our failure to meet the Millennium Development Goals in relation to sanitation. The goal was to halve by 2015 the proportion of the population without sustainable access to safe drinking water and improved sanitation. While in the case of water supply, everything was okay, sanitation was a disaster. Our toilet ranking status has remained relatively unchanged. What role are we, the engineers, playing positively influence this sad state of affairs? According to the UNDP report of 2015 on the subject, about 64% of the global population currently use improved sewage and toilet facilities. Ghana, on the contrary, has struggled to make significant progress in the area of sanitation. Ghana is presently among the bottom 7 countries worldwide when the issue of access to improved sanitation is discussed. The UNDP report expressed particular concern that our beloved country has remained static at 15% since 2011. 1 in 10 Ghanaians, Mr. Chairman, has access to improved toilet facilities. Currently, open defecation remains a sad, prevalent practice in Ghana at a rate that dropped only slightly from 22% to 19% during the period, the 15-year period of the MDGs. Mr. Chairman, to compound the problems in the sector, almost all the sewage treatment plants and fecal plants have broken down. The state of deterioration of these facilities is such as to require huge sums of money for their rehabilitation. And even thereafter, there is no guarantee that the facilities will receive the required routine and periodic maintenance needed to sustain them. In locations such as Tema, where pitch fiber pipes were adopted without due consideration for their rheological properties, collector and main sewers would also require replacement. On account of the inadequate funding for sanitation, Mr. Chairman, affordability agitations by foreign experts have become an issue of great concern. As a result, the Accra sewage system, which was started in the early 1970s under a World Bank support program, was completely abandoned. The foreign expert based their argument on inadequate water supplies available to developing countries. However, Mr. Chairman, for most cities in Ghana, particularly Accra, the water supply situation has recorded a significant improvement, but not so with sanitation. Currently, significantly large areas of our cities rely on waterborne flushing toilets discharging into septic tanks. And Mr. Chairman, we are all aware of the problems posed by the improper discharge of the contents of septic tanks into public drains and watercourses, and the associated environmental hazards posed by such practices. Evidently, sanitation in Accra would have been better off had the sewage system development option been pursued. Available records, Mr. Chairman, this is from the history of science, and suggests that the invention of the sewage system is the most significant scientific discovery ever made by man. This rating is on account of the millions of lives that this single invention has saved. Sewage systems have tremendous capacity to handle the increased population. In 1870, when London adopted the use of underground sewage, it had a population of 2 million. At the current population of over 8 million, most sections of the original sewage remain intact, with the critical maintenance problems related to the aging of the pipe material rather than capacity. The Accra Sewage Project has been cited in literature on the subject as a classic example of a white elephant. Here too, the argument falls short because the success of the project was based on the ability of the vulnerable members of the community to pay connection fees. The connection fees at the time could have been absorbed by the government. It is therefore not surprising that in a recent World Bank Comprehensive Assessment report on the Accra Sewage Project, the bank concluded that sewer connections should be included in the cost of all similar investments in the future. On the issue of huge initial costs, Mr. Chairman, it is rather absurd to assume that such a critical investment to promote public health could be obtained at a cheaper cost. At present, the huge cost of drugs imported into the country on an annual basis for diseases which could have been prevented by the project is enough testimony that one cannot afford to dismiss such a project on the basis of affordability. There is considerable difficulty in trying to relate the results of the economic feasibility analysis with social circumstances of the average beneficiary. In order to make such projects beneficial to all members of the community, it is necessary to modify the traditional approach and bring to the benefit stream the social benefits that accrue to society. In the case of on-site toilet facilities, which is the option recommended by the foreign experts, the population explosion, particularly in the urban areas, makes its use unsuitable. This is the reason the WHO and the UNDP Joint Monitoring Platform rejected public toilet in Accra as an improved facility. Furthermore, while the presence of a functional and hygienic sanitation facility, such as pit latrine, is a necessary condition to eliminate feces from the rural household environment, only its use by all family members has a health impact. The benefit of safe disposal practices do not accrue only to the immediate household, but also to the community at large, because feces from one household can easily be carried, for example, by the housefly, or washed into the environment of neighboring households. Bateman and Smith, these are researchers, found out in a 1991 study that for maximum health impact, about 75% of the household in a given community should have and use hygienic toilets or latrine. Mr. Chairman, the scale and complexity of sanitation problems in the urban and rural areas of Ghana are intensifying, and the rural and urban poor, with their low income, inconsistent employment, and low assets, make them more vulnerable in their ability to access basic services. Slums have therefore become the acutest manifestation of the urban poverty, physical, environmental deprivation, while the rural areas remain as incubation zones for ignorance and disease. This has created big challenges for the national and local government authorities in Ghana, as access to improved toilet becomes more difficult. For the rural communities, aggressive intervention is necessary for sanitation to be made effective and include the exposure to the hygienic practices such as washing of hands on regular basis and bought into the idea of having a private family latrine. This strategy is critical if rural dwellers are to see a reduction in diarrhea disease and increased productivity from improved health status. Such habits are effectively formed at the childhood stages of the growth process. This, therefore, Mr. Chairman, presents ample opportunity for the authorities responsible for primary education to reintroduce hygiene in the school curriculum. In an editorial caption of 15th January 2018, this year, that edition of the Time magazine, Bill Gates described the good news which the whole world should celebrate. And I want to quote him here. "Look at the number of children who die before their 5th birthday. Since 1990, this figure has been cut in half. And that means 122 million children have been saved in a quarter of a century. And countless families have been spared the heartbreak of losing a child." The global narrative of Mr. Gates' story his good news story, sadly does not apply to Ghana. According to the Time magazine, Mohamed Nassi, if he had been born a few years earlier, he might not have hit this milestone. As the story goes, his country, Ethiopia, and I quote from the Time magazine, wrestled down its mortality rate for children under 5 by 2/3 during the period 1990 to 2012. This is an impressive feat for a low-income nation. End of quote. In a follow-up caption, the Time magazine continues, even the poorest countries in the world are tackling crises like child mortality, disease outbreak, and extreme poverty. The big question is, what is the status of Ghana in all these? As a participant in the integrated management of childhood illnesses, certainly the silence on Ghana is an indication of nothing to write home about. At more than 15% diarrhea-induced deaths for children under 5, Ghana needs something more than the multiplicity of public toilets springing up in our communities. Such facilities cannot be counted as improved toilets and have been singled out as a major culprit in the infant mortality debacle which confronts our country. Mr. Chairman, another important area in sanitation relates to the issue of solid waste management. The key areas on which I wish to dwell are: 1, choice of appropriate collection vehicle; 2, recycling and the issue of plastic waste; 3, reuse and energy recovery; and 4, acquisition of land for development of sanitary landfills. Mr. Chairman, there is a technology choice in the collection and disposal vehicle for solid waste which cannot be sustained in the long run. The use of sophisticated compaction-assisted collection vehicles has been chosen for Ghana without considering its technical merits. Such vehicles were designed for the more affluent communities where the density of the refuse is low, and it can be compacted from the low density of 0.2 tons per cubic meter to 0.7 tons per cubic meter. The latter is the threshold, the upper threshold of the compaction capabilities of these vehicles. The local refuse in Ghana here has densities ranging from 0.45 to 0.55 tons per cubic meter. Therefore, its compaction from the natural density of 0.55 tons per cubic meter to 0.7 tons per cubic meter does not necessarily bring about the desired benefit and may account for the high cost of the service. The initial investment, operation and maintenance cost of one of these compaction-assisted vehicles is equivalent to about 2 or possibly 3 side loaders. Yet, these are the vehicle of choice in most cities in Ghana. Mr. Chairman, Recycling is the next issue I wish to discuss. In order to reduce amount of waste conveyed to landfills, the modern approach to waste management is recycling. By this process, useful components of the waste stream, which can serve as raw materials in the industry, are captured. Recycling is generally accomplished in 5 steps, namely segregation, processing, sale, manufacture of new products, and marketing of the recycled product. These are concepts to be integrated into our waste management practice in order to save time and money and to ensure scarce resources are not wasted in the landfill. As indicated in the options chart here, prevention and minimization of waste are associated with the priorities established at a personal, household, community, or business level, all with the objective to reduce waste production. Mr. Chairman, reuse of waste involves conservation or repair of a commodity with the objective of ensuring efficiency in the use of resources, and would also involve issues such as transportation, information dissemination, to constitute a suitable network for the supply chain. Recycling is basically to recover and turn an end product from one industry into a raw material for another industry. And in this regard, incineration can be considered as a part of recycling, and provided the calorific value of the waste is suitable. And we are talking about waste of calorific value of higher than 14.4 megajoules per kilogram of waste. And such waste can be burned to produce heat energy, which can be converted into electrical energy and fed onto the transmission grid. The word of caution here, Mr. Chairman, is that the calorific value of our local refuse is much, much lower and cannot function effectively in an industrial setting. Added to this is the high moisture content, which would require supplemental energy to drive or remove it. Mr. Chairman, in concluding the discussion on recycling, a justifiable question to pose with respect to plastics is, do wasteful consumers alone cause the problem of the plastic menace? I will repeat that question. Do wasteful consumers alone cause the problem of the plastic menace? Why are manufacturers of plastic waste allowed to enjoy their profits without contributing to the management of plastic waste? The plastic waste problem, Mr. Chairman, is a huge global issue capable of ending life on this planet on account of its effect on fish life. Can you imagine a situation where humanity loses the availability of fish for food? Let us examine the following issues. Mr. Chairman, the very idea of producing plastic items, such as grocery bags, which we use a little over 10 minutes and discard it to persist in the environment for 100 years is, you can add, is irresponsible. 2, scientists have long recognized that plastics have extremely low biodegradation rate. And, Mr. Chairman, in the aquatic environment, some of these plastics absorb toxins and emit odors which mimic the presence of food. And that is the food the marine creatures are attracted to. 4, plastic accumulate in the food chain. And from the look of things, humans are also ingesting plastics through consumption of seafood. What is the interest of big companies that produce plastic bags and bottles in all these? Don't they introduce the plastic bottles so as to maximize their profits? Why? Why should the taxpayer continue to be responsible for the cleanup while these companies are only interested in how to maximize their profits? From the foregoing, we all agree that recycling has tremendous benefit and must be encouraged. However, it appears the real culprit for the plastic menace is being left off the hook. We have been coerced into accepting individual responsibility for a problem we have little control over. And it suffices to say that we can swim against this plastic stream with all our might and fail to make any headway. At some point, we need to address the source of the problem, which is the manufacturers of plastic waste. Why should such major polluters be left off the hook and the burden placed on consumers? I wish to enlist your support to call your members of parliament and all opinion leaders to change direction and tackle the problem from the source. If the plastic manufacturers are not ready to accept their responsibilities, then we have no option but to call on the government, the senior minister is here, to call on the government to ban the manufacture of plastics, as has been done in the cleanest city in Africa, that is Rwanda. Mr. Chairman, another waste management issue of great interest, this one is of interest, is composting. This is a recommended disposal method for Ghana on account of its benefit to agriculture, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you will testify to that. Ghana's experience with composting has not been very exciting. The first compost plant at the Teshinungwa estate ended up as a nightmare. However, Mr. Chairman, recent experience with the Nungwa farms, where there is a public-private partnership between a private company, Gencora Ventures, Tema Metropolitan Assembly, and the International Water Management Institute. And this appears to be doing very well. The only problem is that there is clamor for subsidy to the farmers in line with similar financial backing the government gives to farmers, requiring importation of chemical fertilizers. On account of the compost being a more environmentally friendly commodity in comparison with the foreign imports, government would do well to give due consideration to their request. Mr. Chairman, another important issue is the disposal in sanitary landfills. The nature of landfill operation is such that a considerable amount of time is required at the end of each day's shift to undertake urgent housekeeping activities. The situation at the Tema sanitary landfill does not allow operatives to undertake these critical activities. The inability to compact and cover each day's lift will decrease the available airspace and eventually reduce the lifespan of the landfill. This situation has been created by opening the site to waste from outside its design catchment area. The facility was designed for a daily load of 500 tons per day from Tema and Ashaman. However, it is now accepting waste from the entire Greater Accra metropolitan area, the entire sub-region. Information from the site, Mr. Chairman, indicates that load discharge activities often extend into the night, confirming the violation of the operational procedures established for the management of the plant. Finally, the unavailability of land for sanitary landfill development in most urban areas constitute a real threat. The not my backyard syndrome. Nobody wants to have it near his house. Meanwhile, the city is spreading all over. If this is left unresolved, the urban space will be covered with filth, so much so that nobody would want to live in an urban area. Having considered these thematic issues, Mr. Chairman, let us discuss the human and financial elements. Mr. Chairman, above all else, the institutional problems faced by the MMDAs are the root causes of all the issues we have been discussing this evening. Chiefly among these problems are: 1, lack of appropriate institutions and associated systems and procedures needed to undertake the activities required in the assemblies. 2, absence of people with appropriate skill mix for animating these institutions and undertaking relevant activities. 3, insufficient funding for development of the necessary infrastructure and also for operation, and maintenance. The absence of appropriate waste management institutions with adequately trained professional personnel at both the central and the local level of government has widely affected service delivery. Problems in the sector, Mr. Chairman, started to manifest itself in the early 1990s with the decentralization program, when the MMDAs were given responsibility without the necessary resources. The immediate causes can be traced to the late 1990s, when the government of Ghana, in an effort to deodorize, I use that term because to deodorize the Ghana Water and Sewage Company for private sector participation, they unbundled the sewage component for management by the assemblies. Unfortunately, the advent of decentralization could not sustain a qualified medical officer of health in the health department of the assemblies. And to make matters worse, the staff responsible for sewage in the Ghana Water and Sewage Company did not join the MMDAs for obvious reasons. Thus, the management of sensitive government installations was left in the hands of graduates from the School of Hygiene who have not been trained to manage such engineering facilities. Another interesting issue, Mr. Chairman, is that the decoupling process took away a very important live wire of the engineering practice related to sanitation, at least so far as sewage is concerned. Engineering practice, Mr. Chairman, present the medium in which sanitation issues can be organized, properly organized, where given solutions could be tested and the implementation approaches crystallized. Removal of engineering expertise from sanitation gave it a different character altogether, particularly so when at the destination point, that is in the MMDAs, sanitation was considered as a health issue. Mr. Chairman, the most damaging effect is the diminished numbers of seasoned engineering professionals practicing in the sector. Most of them have left. Some of them have gone outside the country to other places where they will be recognized because they can't afford to stay in Ghana and just deal with pit latrines. They want to be involved in sewage systems, sludge digesters, and all the mechanics that go with it. In the main document, there's an elaborate presentation on some of these issues, especially the sludge digesters. Mr. Chairman, at present, there's no other alternative but to restart the institution building process. The new Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources will do well to ensure that engineering knowledge is made the key driver of all sanitation investments. On financing, Mr. Chairman, available evidence suggests that in the past several decades, the sanitation sector has been heavily dependent on external sources, with over 90% of expenditure borne through project-related interventions. Since these sources depend on the agenda set by a multiplicity of interests, it is hardly likely to converge into the national policy of Ghana in a positive way. The government of Ghana has not devoted enough attention to sanitation, relegating it to a local level issue, and therefore to be funded by taxes raised by an institution already challenged in this area. This strategy is not yielding the desired dividend on account of the static nature of the sanitation coverage. We got the statistics earlier on. Having missed the Millennium Development Targets on sanitation should be enough wake-up call to the central government to consider allocating funds for sanitation schemes and projects. The establishment of the new Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources, coupled with the presidential initiative on urban sanitation, gives an indication of hope. Mr. Chairman, the economics of the sanitation initiative indicates that the high interest rate charged by banks in Ghana is discouraging private investment in home toilets. A recent study under the Water and Sanitation Program, WSP, of the World Bank has established that Ghana loses an amount of $290 million annually on account of inadequate practices in the management of liquid waste. Of this amount, approximately 74% is attributed to the premature death of about 19,000 Ghanaians, including 5,100 children, from such preventable diseases as diarrhea and cholera. The colossal annual amount indicated do not include such obvious but difficult to measure costs as 1, cost of the epidemic outbreak; 2, funeral costs for which there are no efforts to gather reliable data; 3, costs associated with water pollution from fecal contamination and, in recent times, by galamsey; 4, costs associated with trauma and cognitive development of affected individuals; 5, costs and perceived losses associated with the reduction of tourism potential of an area. Just want to shift your attention to the Cape Coast Castle and what happens at the beach behind the castle. Six, foregone benefits related to the reprocessing of excreta into beneficial uses such as compost for agriculture and energy recovery for sludge digesters. These are real costs, which when introduced into the benefit side of the equation during the economic analysis, it will make the sector more profitable than any gold mine that you can think of. And this is a challenge. Let our research institutions cost all these things and add, and let's do the benefit cost analysis and determine the rate of return. And we will see the return on the investment. For the mere fact that there are no research institutions in the sector to uncover these hidden treasures, Ghanaians are wallowing in poverty. Mr. Chairman, on account of the high cost of capital in Ghana, it is not surprising that house owners are not investing in sanitation. It is equally unreasonable to force stakeholders who are earning a living to be compelled to pay. And could this be the necessary justification why people are defecating in unauthorized locations? No, I don't think so. Perhaps there is urgent need for government to step in and provide subsidized toilet in homes. At least the ongoing World Bank supported program to provide subsidized toilet for homes in the Greater Accra metropolitan area must be replicated in other parts of the country. Now, we will spend some time with the recommendation, having exposed the problem. I'm sure now we are all aware of the kind of problems, sanitation problems we are facing. So let's look at a few recommendations. And the institutional and the financial are the most important, so I'll take them first. On the institutional, there are 3 recommendations. The first one is that the government should institute measures to establish and equip under the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources an apex agency to be responsible for rationally centralized activities in sanitation. I want to repeat that again. A rationally centralized activities in sanitation. That's what the apex agency must be established to do. This may be pursued along the lines developed for the Department of Urban Roads. The Management Services Division of the Office of Head of Civil Service can give the necessary support in this assignment. One key institution in the MMDAs, this is 2, the second recommendation. One key institution in the assemblies with a huge expectation is the Waste Management Department. It is our recommendation that after the establishment of the apex institution in the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources, the next move should be to strengthen the individual waste management department in the assemblies, so that once you have that department established properly, they can, one can rise as assistant engineer from the assembly and go all the way to the ministries and possibly to become a chief director. So there is a scheme of service. In fact, one of the biggest problems we have with the institutional aspect is that there's no scheme of service. And I suffered a lot, under it until I was rescued, from it. The third issue is that the third recommendation is that steps to increase interest of professional engineers in the sector and to create an enabling environment for those who have completed their studies outside the country to come home and assist to rescue the sector. But until they get to know that there is a viable institution they can come and work in, they will never come. They will stay. They are more comfortable outside, and they will stay there. On financing, Mr. Chairman, the first one is that the government has to increase the spending on sanitation. And I saw the senior minister scribbling something, so I think some of these things, have been taken on board. Second, on financing, the establishment of a sanitation fund with inflows from various sources, including a waste importation tax to be levied on importation of products which have served their useful lives elsewhere. So, having considered this issue, let's go back to the thematic areas. In the thematic areas, Mr. Chairman, I have 12 recommendations. And the first one is social protection for vulnerable groups. A significant burden of the sanitation problem bears on the poor, and very often on women and children, the aged, and the physically challenged. Mr. Chairman, this group represents a significant proportion of our population, particularly so, knowing that this segment of the population is the most vulnerable. The Sustainable Development Goals offer us the opportunity to improve our previous performance. We talked about the MDGs, and our performance there's nothing to write home about. So with the new Sustainable Development Goals, Ghana has an opportunity to redeem itself and to move from the 7 bottom countries in the world, to maybe halfway or somewhere, anywhere above the bottom 7, and anywhere above the bottom 7 is desirable. This is the time, therefore, for the GhIE to prioritize sanitation as a key result area in its development efforts. If you go to GhIE, they would give you, the meaning of a key result area. So if they say key result area of your development effort, one of them should be sanitation. And we are hopeful it will be taken on board. And for this, we are putting the following suggestions forward. There are 2. That's A, the government should provide funds to build subsidized toilet facilities in a proportionate percentage of the housing stock. If you look at the chart, at the bottom there we have the housing stock in the various regions. The objective should be to eliminate the use of public toilet in communities, open defecation, and to enforce the ban on bucket latrines. B, on account of the predominant use of septic tanks in most urban areas, modern methods of sludge treatment incorporating resource recovery must be encouraged. The government should investigate measures to encourage the private sector to participate and build more of the sludge treatment plant that is described on the screen. And an example is what Zoomlion has built in Accra here. So let's continue with the other recommendation. That does it for recommendation 1. Recommendation 2. Among current innovations to tackle the problems in septic treatment are through private sector initiatives. Zoomlion has constructed a septic treatment facility in Accra. I mentioned that earlier. And B, other private sector efforts have been aimed at treatment involving primary sedimentation, coagulation, drying and compaction of solid with correspondent supernatant treated and the solids packaged for sale to local industries which import coal for their furnaces. There are some local companies that import coal, and we can treat this material in such a way that it can be used as a substitute for the coal that is used in the furnaces. C, initiatives under ongoing PPP between the International Water Management Institute, TMA, and a private operator. I talked about it earlier. An assessment of the viability of these options should be made and advice proposed in a strategic direction to be pursued. And I think this will be the job of the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources. For rural communities, Mr. Chairman, the use of various on-site systems such as VIP, KVIP, aqua privis, and variation of ecological sanitation toilets such as biofuel, EcoSan, and the Van Peace are to be encouraged. Advocacy groups should therefore be encouraged to promote the use of such facilities, but in homes, not as public toilets. No, should be used in homes. 4, the government should encourage our research institutions and universities to develop research programs in this all-important area of sanitation. As we are aware, the World Bank sponsored KVIP program, which our own Professor Wright was given the responsibility, was done that's about 40 years ago on account of its extensive use for all situations in this country. And the fact that there's also a tendency of it being overloaded, especially when it is used as a public toilet. The KVIP cannot be considered as appropriate facility for a public toilet, but is recommended for a home toilet. 5, the development of the biofuel toilet is the most significant discovery in the sector since the era of Governor Gaggisberg's promotion of home toilets connected to a central sewage system. This is a breakthrough for Ghana, and on account of its international recognition, we must all embrace it. In fact, we were delighted when the news came out that the brain behind the biofuel initiative, this innovative technology, the gentleman is called Mr. Anno, and he has his factory in Jowolo. Mr. Ando's invitation, he was invited to India to showcase his invention. And it was a big success that he got a lot of contracts from India, And what we cautioned him was that the Indians will steal the technology and come and sell it to Ghanaians. So he should be very careful about that. These are preferred to the outmoded toilets, such as aqua privy and the conventional pit latrine and even septic tank. In fact, I use the biofuel in my house, and for the past 6 years, I haven't had any problem with it. It's the best, and you also get a facility to irrigate your grass in the house. It's the best that we can think of. An important feature of the biofuel technology, here is good news, is that a training program has been established by this innovative entrepreneur, Mr. Ano, to train entrepreneurs to establish their own companies for providing the service in other parts of the country. What we recommend is that the Ministry of Sanitation and Water should establish contact with this gentleman and see how this laudable technology can be extended to various parts of the country. And this is the sixth item, the sixth recommendation. The circular architecture of homes in certain parts of the country present serious challenges on where to site a home toilet without incurring the wrath of one's neighbor. As part of the advocacy to discourage open defecation, the government should request the Faculty of Architecture at the KNUST to undertake research in the area with the objective of coming out with an acceptable planning configuration. 7, recent initiatives mooted under funding from the African Development Bank to extend the central sewage system in certain parts of Ghana should be fully adopted as part of a long-term program for the development of a central sewage system for Accra. Similar effort must be made to rehabilitate the Tema Metropolitan Assembly facilities. I think we saw some of the pictures for Tema. 8, broken down sewage systems and fecal plants in several locations of the country have been neglected for far too long. With the establishment of the new Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources, plans must be put in place to rehabilitate these facilities and establish a maintenance regime where the central government will provide adequate funds for routine and periodic maintenance. 9, we are going to 12. We are almost there. With the rapid urbanization facing the country, the resident population from rural communities are gradually relocating into cities and other urban centers. As part of the required planning to control the influence and to control and influence the growth poles of these cities, critical infrastructure such as seaways should be developed in tandem with other development activities such as roads. In other words, when we are doing the road works, we should lay some sewer lines in certain locations, all in a planned manner, so that when it's ready to extend sewage facility to the area, we are not going to rip the road apart in the middle and put sewer lines there. It would have already been done. So this is the 9th recommendation. 10, lands acquired for some of the existing treatment plants and fecal plants in the country are being encroached. This is an example, Tema. This is a laboratory, and Immediate steps must be taken to reclaim and secure all such properties. 11, available land acquired for some of the existing treatment plants and fecal plants especially may not be sufficient for the purpose on account of the population increase and more stringent effluent quality as justifiably proposed by the EPA to meet current trends. Such issues are to be carefully considered and, where necessary, propose upscale technologies like activated sludge and the rest, commensurate with the expected BOD levels to be treated. And finally, 12. Mr. Chairman, just as the River Thames in London has become the habitat of various species of fish, the Coral Lagoon in Accra can be cleaned to support fish life on a permanent basis. This can only happen if the inflows to the Odo River are identified and the necessary measures instituted to reduce the BOD levels. The BOD is the biological oxygen demand. It's technical. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, just as the report of Professor Simpson triggered construction of the Wager Dam and the associated water supply schemes, let this report trigger the awareness in Ghana to initiate sustainable plans to salvage the sanitation sector. He said, Senior Minister, these 12 recommendations in the thematic areas and the 5 on institutional and financial consideration present a starting point. A comprehensive approach is therefore required to address the multifaceted nature of Ghana's sanitation problems. The institution and financial challenges have to be addressed. The institutional and financial challenges have to be addressed head-on with bold measures that will ensure implementation with a sense of urgency. Thank you.
I think our president deserves another round of applause. The full booklet will be made available, and having read it, I think it will do for a PhD thesis. And if the assemblies are around, perhaps I think each assembly should have one and let their district engineers and works departments take a good look at it, and they will benefit from it immensely. The senior minister himself is a fellow of this institution. I saw him make a few remarks, a few notes. I have the permission of the chairman to allow him a few remarks before the chairman comes in to do his closing remarks. Honorable Yao Osafumaf.
Mr. Chairman, the journalists have a term which I like. Say, don't ambush me. I think I have been ambushed, but rightly so. I think I've said it elsewhere and I'm repeating it. If, say, the Ghana Institution of Engineering, the Institution of Architects, and all these professional institutions will have influence on the government, then they should look at prevailing problems and tackle them from the professional point of view and try to create the necessary contact specifically with those responsible. This is addressed primarily to the Minister for Sanitation and Water. And it is so usefully packaged that there's no reason why I should not arrange for the Minister and our President to sit and discuss this issue. And I think this is the way professional institutions should be looking at problems in Ghana. I told the Institute of Architects that the government creates Ministry for Inner City and Zongo Development. And at the time I spoke, for about 1.5 years, nobody from the Institute of Architects has spoken to that ministry. You think who is to help solve inner city and Zongo problems? They are related, am I right? Are they not primarily planning and architectural problems? Don't you think someone should take the initiative so that we can create a dialogue between that ministry and the professional body? The dialogue, Mr. President, you've just made it easy and possible. And I want personally to assure you that get ready and I will put the two of you together to sort out. When he talks about financing, there's a problem in Ghana about a particular problem which comes in because anytime we are talking about MMDCs, there's a particular tax in this country that we should all look at, and that is property rate. Can you imagine that 2016, the total property rate collected for Greater Accra was 10 million cedis? I mean, can you imagine the records? So then there is something fundamentally wrong. It's a decentralized tax system. It is not part of the Ghana Revenue Authority. It is supposed to be handled by the MMDC. For whatever reason, this is so inefficiently and poorly handled that we should look at it and decide to do it on their behalf. So if you get 10 million and we ask SYZ to do it and give you 30 million, shouldn't you be happy? When you do it yourself, you are getting 10 million. If somebody else does it and gives you 20 or 30, you should be happy. So these are the kind of things we do. We are talking about financing. Sanitation must be financed via the window of property rating. That is why it is decentralized in all other parts of the world. If you went to any city, an honorable late J.H. Miller said, a city that cannot afford to collect its sanitation cannot be called a city. When you get to a level of a city, then it means your property and other related rates should fetch you enough financial resources to handle your sanitation. In Ghana, it's exactly the opposite. No city is able to use its property rate to handle 1% of its sanitation problem. And I think we should all look at it. Thank you, Mr. Executive Secretary. I think I'm so happy this evening that I think the professional bodies are doing it right, and the Ghana Institution of Engineering has taken the right step. Thank you very much.
I will not, in my summary, want to dilute the very potent points that have been made by the senior minister, except to say that our president has given us a very comprehensive and thorough analysis of the pervasive impact of sanitation in all of its spheres. I think the passion with which he did it is unequaled. I don't know anybody who can talk about sanitation with such passion as Steve. And I know in many of our discussions after work when we're sitting on the Indian Ocean sipping a bottle of wine, if you dare bring up the issue of sanitation, his mood changes completely. So I would thank you for sharing that passion with us today, since the evening is long spent, and we have another issue to go to, which is the auctioning of the presidential address booklets, which was very important for us. So I would think the Executive Secretary will come and do that part. I want to thank you very much for participating in this event.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foster, our chairman. We all recognize the fact that women are better at selling things. They are good. They have the... So we're going to call on one of our sharpest female engineers to come up here and sell the first copy of this lovely presidential address. I wish to invite Engineer Okujeto. If you are here, please come forward. And I know you have a very nice way of getting money out of people, so please do it.
Honorable Senior Minister, ministers who are here present with us and deputy ministers, President Engineer Winnie Youngson, past presidents, council members, fellow members from other professional bodies, invited guests, all engineers present here today, ladies and gentlemen. I have been given the Herculean task of trying to give out this book. You know, when I was listening to the President's address, I had the privilege of going through the book earlier, and I was actually amazed how he was able to summarize this 200-page address in such a short presentation, because the kind of information that's in there, the facts, the figures, the research that has gone into this presidential address, I don't know how he did that in less than an hour. So congratulations. Please put your hands together for our president. If anyone is trying to talk about sanitation in Ghana, or is trying to write a document on sanitation in Ghana, and you do not have this presidential address, you are doing yourself a big disservice. You need this to be in your library. In your offices, this should be in the lead of your sanitation documents, in your businesses, in your research, in any place that you are. This is the book you need to talk about sanitation. I'm also going to take the opportunity to introduce our Deputy Minister of Sanitation and Water Resource, who's here with us tonight. So please put your hands together for Honorable Patrick Boama, who's also there, MP for GhIE Central. And Honorable, I'm mentioning your name because this is going to be one of the books that will be going to the ministry. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've spent a lot of time here, and I don't mean to bore you, but we're selling this not because we're trying to make profit, but we're selling this because it's a national asset. It's a document that needs to go out there and reach the masses. But it's also something that should add up to what we know about our current state of sanitation. There are about a dozen tables in there that talks about facts, figures. The kind of recommendations that have been made in this document are amazing. So please bear with me as I ask that our first bidder, who's going to get the signed copy, and I didn't allow the president to sign it ahead of time because I want him to sign it with a golden pen in our presence, and that copy is going for 20,000 Ghana cedis. So please, I want some music in the background so that it suits your hearts. Please, small, low level music. Nothing too hectic. We need to reach your hearts. But we're asking for 20,000 Ghana cedis for the first copy, and I'm going to take the pleasure to go to the president so that he can sign this in your presence for the first person who will take the signed copy book, the original signed copy book with them.
I can see some very big consultants here. So, and I know the kind of fees they charge. I don't want to mention their names and the amount of projects they are working on and how large these projects are.
I'm trying to go in that direction, but I'm trying not to. I'm being assisted by some ladies in the back as well. So if you want to just signal like that, they will let me know, and then I'll really hand this over to our first bidder. 20,000 Ghana cedis. 2 with 1 zero.
I've just received a message from GhIE Energy that they have undertaken to pay 10,000. But we are still waiting for the 20,000.
We know that this book can be sold for 20,000 today. For 20,000. 20,000 Ghana cedis.
I can see my first boss at Ghana Highway Authority, Dr. Abedi here. And he did a lot of consultancy in Tanzania. So. Well, I've also got another good signal. Perhaps maybe we are reserving this for someone. But the representative from the Petroleum Commission says they want to pick up the first book for 20,000. Let's give them a hand. So you keep that. He's quietly hiding in the back, maybe because I don't know why he's hiding, but that's the signal. So GhIE has the second copy for 10,000. The consultants. When I look at the past presidents, Engineer Petu, past President Kwashi, retired fellows have a lot of money in their bank statement. Yes, this one will go to.
So we'll move on to our 10,000 category because GhIE Energy has raised the bar.
Yes.
They have set it off at 10,000, and I know 10,000 too. I'm looking in certain directions.
Maybe, Senior Minister, maybe you can use ministerial fiat so that all district assemblies will come for a copy at 5,000. That's for the institution. We want to raise some cash. I can see the former provost of KNUST, also my lecturer in geotechnical engineering, Professor Ampedu. And Jotech and Dr. Kumaple, Prof. Kumaple used to do a lot of work for you and you made a lot of money. Now we can drop it down to 5,000. I can see Engineer Asariabua, past president, also of ACON, Associated Consultants, and all the consultants, past presidents, working on very large projects. I can see Engineer Chumesi, contractor. It was Dr. Abedi sent me on his road in 1987. Affordable roads at Adenta. And I was supposed to go and approve his compaction and to check. Correction by my boss, to check. And then when we got to Granada Hotel, that time there was only Granada, there was no hotel, no Shangri-La. He bought me a nice burger. And he thought that would mean he would get a clean bill of health. Mr. Chumesi, you can deliver some money for us today. For the burger. One of the most beautiful burgers I've enjoyed in my life. I know the night is okay. Mr. Chumesi will pay the 5,000. Because he's very close to the president. Or is it because of the beggar? Thank you very much. I know that in Ghana he's a resident engineer on the Pokwasi project, and I hear his salary is very high. Delin Consult, engineer, past president, you're working on a big project in the north, I know that. You have not been paid. That's the normal excuse. Do we have some more? I'm picking up some more signals. I hear
5,000 from the Ministry of
I've just also picked up a signal on my phone here that BOST, they will also pay significant amount of money. But that is not to be declared. Senior Minister, this is not something that your executive director will accept. You were the first managing director of the Bank for Housing and Construction. There's a lot of money there. And then National Investment Bank, lots of money there. And then Finance Minister and Education Minister. Oh yeah, dear. You be here, Honorable Deputy Minister, please convey this message to the Minister of Local Government, who was invited, and all the engineering-related ministries were given invitations. They spoke to me. Some of them, unfortunately, were not in town, so they asked their deputies to represent them. mean, at least I think the assemblies will need this book. The assemblies will need this book. If they cannot afford 5, they should come and negotiate with me in the office. 5,000 per book for each assembly. We can negotiate.
I actually agree. I think every MMD should have.
That is why I treasure you so much, you know.
5,000.
We've laid out some finger foods for you downstairs. All the big telecommunication companies, you employ engineering personnel. Where are you? That's a good one. One district, one book. At what price? Who should negotiate that price, I believe, Senior Minister?
With the 5,000, can we get the 2,000 copies moving slowly here while others decide on closing up on the 5,000? So I think we all want them to take on. Should we keep the 5,000? Oh, only VRA would like to make a copy for 5,000 Ghana cedis.
VRA 5,000. Considering the number of VRA personnel who are chairs of technical divisions and members of the National Council, you should be paying more than that. The Vice President is from VRA, Engineer Danladi is from VRA, Engineer Jacob Yosin is from VRA, and many others. Isaac Bedu is from VRA. A few minutes to close the auction. I can see Engineer Past President Edunyako is smiling at me a bit. Oh, he says he's retired. Hello, sir. Engineer David Nyante, don't hide. Talo, you have a lot of money. Not to be discussed. Anyway, they have supported us a lot during the past year, and they have indicated they are going to even support us more next year. So we'll leave that to the budget. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Okujeto. Let's give a hand to our lovely lady. Thank you so much. It's time to bring this lovely occasion to a conclusion, and no other person to call on than our first female president, and now freshly elected as the president-elect, Federation of African Engineering Organizations, Mrs. Carlien Buchedi, to come and give us a short vote of thanks, madam. We want you to do that as this favor.
Chairman, Senior Minister, President, past presidents, members of other professional bodies, and all other protocols observed. I believe I've just been ambushed. But it's still an opportunity for me to say thank you all very much. First of all, to the President. I mean, when I looked at the size of the book, I knew he had done a lot of work, but this is much more than I expected, and you can see that this is real work. And everybody in this room, I'm sure, appreciated very much the address that you delivered during your lecture. I was looking around and everybody was very attentive. Thank you very much for a very well-researched address and very well delivered. I'd like also to thank the chairman for gracing this occasion and for his remarks and making the whole occasion, very light and enjoyable with the kind of remarks that he made. Thank you. We'd also like, and I especially like to thank the wife of the president for joining us on this occasion. It's not something that spouses always like to do, and therefore we like to thank spouses when they join their husbands for a serious address like this. Thank you so much. Finally, every single one of you here deserves our appreciation and our thanks for joining us on this occasion and for being here to take away the message and make sure that it's acted upon. Senior Minister, I know that you convey what has gone on here today to all the other powers that be, the Vice President and the ministers and so on, and thank you very much for being here and for doing that for us. And finally, to the press, we hope that the message will get to everybody so that what we've done here today will help to move our country forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam IPP. And on this occasion, we started with a prayer, so we'll close with a prayer. And I would just like to say the grace. May we be upstanding to say the closing grace. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and forevermore. Amen. Thank you very much. And there is light refreshments, finger foods down there. So can you please wait for the senior minister and the president and the past presidents to file out, and then